Sometimes it's all about the second chance. After dropping game one on the road in Milwaukee, game two, it's a second chance bucket by Tyrese Halliburton that helps Indy take advantage of their second chance game. A 23-point advantage at that point. That's all they needed to see. Indy steals one on the road and in turn becomes the first team this playoffs in the NBA to win a game on the road. 125-108 is your final. The numbers do the talking. Pascal Siakam, unbelievable in both game one and game two. In fact, he is the first NBA player to open the playoffs with back-to-back 35-point, 10-rebound games since Wilt Chamberlain in 1967. Spicy P leveling things out at one. Back in studio alongside Spicy B, Bill Reiter here to bring us all the latest from this one. Let's get spicy because this is a matchup and a game that had a whole lot in it. You got Giannis still sidelined. You got an Indy team young, as you've pointed out prior to. Is this the exact type of performance they needed to have in game two?
That's exactly it. They shook off those nerves that you saw in game one, and they played Pacers basketball. One of the things the Pacers did so well this year was they moved the rock. They played team basketball, at least on offense. They led the NBA in team assists per game, right around 31. That dropped to 20 in that game one loss to the Bucks. And what that tells you is they were rushing things. They weren't being patient. They weren't trusting what had gotten them here. In this game, 38 assists, good for a franchise record for the number of assists in a playoff game. And that's why you saw so many guys helping out. You mentioned Pascal Siakam was awesome individually, and he's obviously one at the highest levels in the NBA. He's the voice. He's the guy that's been through the wars and gotten to that ring. But you saw Tyrese Halliburton play well, and Miles Turner play well, and all the other guys in this roster play well, in large part because they got back to doing what the Pacers do, and that's sharing the basketball and really nice defensive effort. Those things go together. The offense starts to click, and you feel better on the other side of the ball sometimes, too.
Siakam in that title run with Toronto was certainly the complementary piece to the main scorer in Kawhi Leonard. Talk to me about, not the power struggle, but the dynamic offensively here for Indy. Halliburton was supposed to be that piece for Indy. Since returning from injury, he hasn't been his full self. Is Siakam the type of star you can hitch a wagon to and advance beyond a first-round matchup?
Beyond, it's a great question. Beyond a first-round matchup, yes. Into an NBA Finals or a Conference Finals, which, let's be fair, that feels kind of like a tall order for this Pacers team. Maybe not. I don't think this is what has gone on in Milwaukee when we've seen when Giannis has been on the floor where he and Dame are trying to figure each other out. Siakam understands, talking to folks in that organization, that it's Halliburton's show. But Tyrese Halliburton hasn't been the same since his injury after the new year. He's just not been the same level of player. Hasn't been as consistent, hasn't been as explosive, hasn't been as dynamic. And what a secondary star does, especially when his primary star is a young, inexperienced guy, especially in postseason basketball, Joe, he steps up. And when his dude is struggling, and when his team is struggling, he takes over. So he did in game one, didn't get enough help. Did in game two, not because I think he needs to be the focal point, because to your point, he recognizes as a former champion what it takes when some of the other guys aren't firing, and he took some of that burden on himself. That's what veterans do, and that's what winners do.
Still a double-double here for Halliburton, but doing it in different ways. 11 points and 12 assists, 4 rebounds as well in a winning effort. And that's all that matters because you put a win on the road, on tape. Everybody's got to reassess at 1-1, 2-0. You feel like, hey, let's keep the big fella on the shelf for a while. Does this force Milwaukee's hand a bit with their treatment and the way they're handling the injury of Giannis Antetokounmpo?
It adds major pressure. And in most organizations, and I hope in this organization, you would not allow that pressure to rush back Giannis Antetokounmpo. We know this calf injury can lead to other kinds of injuries. We've talked about Kevin Durant and how that happened to him when he was a member of the Golden State Warriors. But I know a lot of folks in the Milwaukee Bucks front office in that organization. And this isn't going to be shocking, but the level of pressure is extremely high. The decision to bring in Doc Rivers, the decision by the general manager John Horst to trade for Damian Lillard, the fact that Drew Holiday is doing the things he's doing with Boston has not been lost on ownership and people within the walls of where Milwaukee do their business. So, yeah, there's massive pressure. You can't rush him. Easy for me to say, sitting in a studio talking on CBS Sports HQ, they have to push back on what's going to feel like a little desperation time, especially if the Pacers win game 3, and we're not there yet, then all of a sudden you start to wonder. And you have to also protect Giannis from himself. It's not just avoid pressuring Giannis. It's more, Giannis is going to want to compete, and you just got to make sure, because he's so integral to what you do for years, hopefully, you don't let him rush himself out there because he sees things slipping away in this series.
Certainly a cautionary reference point there in Kevin Durant and the series of injuries we saw in that postseason that then cost him an entire season. Before we go here, Bill, this is a conversation we had a couple nights ago regarding Damian Lillard perhaps being freer, easier when Giannis is not out there, able to run the offense at his own accord. 35 in game one, 34 in this game. What was the difference between those two efforts? This one largely hollow in those numbers.
The Pacers played really good basketball, and that's the thing, is that this recipe for Damian Lillard isn't going to work, and that's not a shot at Damian Lillard. You're either going to play better basketball teams, or in the case of game 2 of this opening round series, the team you're playing is going to play better basketball. And the Bucks earned their game 1 win, sure. But the Pacers were awful and looked nervous and looked off balance and looked like they didn't belong. That's not going to last every game of this series, and certainly not every game of how many series you play in. And watching this game, Joe, it reminded me so much of watching Damian Lillard be awesome in Portland, where he had some help, but not enough help. And he was extraordinary, but a one-man wrecking crew, that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't matter what guy you are. Nikola Jokic is not winning an NBA championship without Jamal Murray. Jason Tatum needs the help and all the depth they added, especially in the offseason. Damian Lillard's amazing, but he does not have enough help without Giannis, and that's the crux of the problem we were just talking about. Dame Time's great, but Dame Time's not going to do it alone.
Well, the time is now because it's a best of 5 moving forward. 1-1 aside following this Pacers win. Bill, thank you. All right, here's a look at what lies ahead. Game 3 coming your way Friday, 5:30 Eastern in Indy. I'm just saying it right now. Caitlin Clark's got to be courtside. We got to do it. We got to get the Pacers rocking. We got to get the city believing. Game 4, that's coming your way Sunday on the later side, 7 Eastern time in Indy as well. We will see how it plays out. Beyond that, Game 5 coming your way Tuesday.